Here is the video of the most dramatic party switch in the history of the United States Senate.
In order to best represent my state of Vermont, my own conscience and principles I have stood for my whole life, I will leave the Republican Party and become an independent. Control of the Senate. Sorry for that. Control of the Senate will be changed by my decision. I'm sorry for that interruption, but I understand it. I will make this change and will caucus with the Democrats.
That was May 24th, 2001, when Senator Jim Jeffords switched parties from Republican to Democrat in a 50-50 Senate, thereby creating a 51-seat majority for the Democrats. With that stunningly dramatic announcement in Burlington, Vermont, Democratic Senator Tom Daschle instantly went from being minority leader to majority leader of the Senate, and all Republican chairmen of the Senate committees were instantly replaced by Democratic chairmen of all Senate committees. We had seen party switches before in the Senate, but never to instantly change control of the Senate with a party switch. Alabama's Democratic Senator Richard Shelby switched parties to become a Republican in 1994, and just 2 months before Richard Shelby switched parties, he told the New York Times, "I have no intention of switching parties. I can be more effective inside the Democratic Party by moving them to the right. President Clinton ran as a New Democrat, and we thought we were getting a centrist, but he has not been that. In order for the president to survive, he has to move back toward the center. He's a smart politician and very resilient, and I think he'll do that." And then 2 months later, something happened that no one saw coming. Richard Shelby didn't see it coming. No one predicted that in Bill Clinton's first midterm election, the Democrats would lose control of the United States Senate. The Democrats also lost control of the House of Representatives that year for the first time in 40 years, and no one predicted that either. There were 57 Democratic senators in 1994, but on election night, the Democrats were left with 47 senators to the Republicans' new majority of 53. Senator Richard Shelby woke up the day after the election day in the minority party in the United States Senate, and he was able to stand that for a couple of hours before he announced he was switching parties to the winning side. Senator Shelby was able to preserve his committee assignments in the deal he negotiated for his party switch. And now, after 28 years as a Senate Republican, on top of his first 8 years as a Senate Democrat, 88-year-old Richard Shelby will finally be retiring from the Senate at the end of this year, with Republicans still stuck in the minority in the Senate. Early Friday morning, Washington was abuzz with what appeared to be another very dramatic party switch in the Senate. Just days after Senator Raphael Warnock's reelection in Georgia guaranteed the Democrats 51 members of the Senate, Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema announced she decided to leave the Democratic Party. The Democrats would still control the Senate floor, with Vice President Kamala Harris casting tie-breaking votes when necessary, but sending the Senate back to its current 50-50 status would mean equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans on committees, where the tie votes create extra procedural difficulties for the Democratic chairs of those committees and for Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor. Senator Sinema's chosen venue for announcing the big change was not to an audience of voters in Arizona, the way Jim Jeffords announced his dramatic party change in 2001 to his voters in Vermont. Instead, She chose a friendly Washington television interviewer to announce that she was changing her voter registration in Arizona from Democrat to independent, an announcement that has no real meaning in the United States Senate. The only question to ask a senator in that situation is a very simple one, and no other question matters. And that question is, who are you going to vote for majority leader? The first thing that a new Senate votes on, as they will in January, is the formal organization of the Senate. The vote for majority leader is bundled with a vote naming all of the Senate committee chairs and a few other organizational items. Senator Sinema was not asked in her announcement interview who she would vote for majority leader. But apparently, to emphasize the TV drama of the moment, she was told this.
They're going to call you every name in the book after this comes out. They're going to call you a traitor.
Not a single Democratic senator called her a traitor or everything in the book. That could not have been more wrong because, as Majority Leader Chuck Schumer explained in a written statement about an hour after that TV interview, Senator Sinema informed me of her decision to change her affiliation to independent. She asked me to keep her committee assignments, and I agreed. Kirsten is independent. That's how she's always been. I believe she's a good and effective senator, and I'm looking forward to a productive session in the new Democratic majority Senate. We will maintain our new majority on committees, exercise our subpoena power, and be able to clear nominees without discharge votes. Translation, Senator Sinema has pledged her vote to Chuck Schumer for majority leader, which means the Democrats will indeed have, as expected, a 51-seat majority, working majority in the Senate. And that means the Democrats will have a 1-seat majority in all of the committees. And that 1-seat majority actually gives them subpoena power in those committees and enables them to move legislation out of those committees seamlessly and flawlessly. And so Senator Sinema did not announce a party switch from one party to the other in the Senate. She simply announced a change in her local voter registration back home in Arizona, which presumably will have significant effects on her reelection dynamics in Arizona. But in the United States Senate, it just makes her the third functioning Democrat in the Senate who is labeled an independent on their voter registration back home. She joins independent Maine Senator Angus King and independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders as one of the 3 Democrats now in the Senate who are technically labeled independents. Independent Bernie Sanders is the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee and a former candidate repeatedly for the Democratic nomination for president. Unlike Vermont Senator Jim Jeffords' party switch 21 years ago, Senator Sinema's change of party label required no courage at all because, as Senator Joe Manchin said today, quote, these are his words, it doesn't change anything. Kirsten Sinema has voted with President Joe Biden 93% of the time. But in a 50-50 Senate, every time you don't vote with your party, it gets noticed. And there are times when it seems there is nothing more important to Senator Sinema than being noticed, which might have a lot to do with why Kirsten Sinema announced the most meaningless label change in Senate history. That's why Chuck Schumer still says she's a good senator. And that's why Joe Manchin said today, it doesn't change anything.